Shalom, shalom. This morning we're going to go over the falling away, part three. How those that continue to cling to him are worshiping the king of darkness, the king of death. It's so weird. Why would I like and subscribe to a timer 51,000 people have? Shalom, Sammy. Yeah, you're building a fence. I need to do that too. Need to get an area prepared for larger animals. Give it 30 more seconds and then we'll start. All right. Falling away, part three. Isaiah 128. But transgressors and sinners will be broken together, and those who forsake Yahweh will come to an end. Remember, forsake is the Greek word apostasy. The great apostasy was the New Testament. The promise of Yahweh, Isaiah 49:14 to 21. But Zion said, Yahweh has forsaken me, and the Lord has forgotten me. Can a woman forget her infant and have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, but I will not forget you. Behold, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Your builders hurry. Your destroyers and devastators will depart from you. Lift up your eyes and look around. All of them gather together. They come to you. As I live, declares Yahweh. You will surely put on all of them as jewels and bind them on as a bride. For your devastated and desolate places and your destroyed land, surely now you'll be too cramped for the inhabitants, and those who swallowed you will be far away. The children of whom you are bereaved will yet say in your ears, the place is too cramped for me. Make room for me that I may live there. Then you will say in your heart, who has borne these for me? Indeed, I have been bereaved of my children, and am barren, and exile, and a wanderer. And who has reared these? Behold, I remained alone. From where did these come? Israel in her affliction declares that Yahweh has forsaken me. But Yah is not short concerning his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to forsake the promise to Israel. He will not forget the way men forget their promises. The whole Torah and the prophets is about his relationship with mankind through his chosen servant, Israel, not Jesus, not Paul. And we even see this in Jonah. And I want to go into this a bit deeper. Like, this is the so-called quote-unquote gospel message of the Bible, minus the New Testament, that Yahweh will remember his promise to Israel. He will restore Israel to the land. It's not about the New Testament idol. It's not about a man that had to die on a cross. It's about Yahweh restoring the physical land to the physical people. And they over spiritualize everything. They like, well, you're just carnal because you think that this has to physically happen. Well, if it doesn't have to physically happen, then you're calling Yahweh a liar. And that's why some of them, and I've seen this in a lot more people today, they say, well, the God of the Old Testament is Goldebeth, the pagan Gnostic god. I'm like, oh, then what you believe is completely nonsense, because without building upon the quote unquote Old Testament, what promises of a Messiah are there? It's meaningless, ludicrous. Caught in the net by the fisher of men. Mark 1:16-17. As he was going along by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting net in the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." Jeremiah 16:16-18. Behold, I am going to send for many fishermen, declares Yahweh, and they will fish for them. Afterwards I will send for many hunters, and they will hunt them from every mountain, every hill, and from the crevices of the rocks. For my eyes are on their ways. They are not hidden from my face. No, you cannot have imputed righteousness. You cannot have your sin covered. He always sees what you've done, and this is why you have to turn from it. I will first doubly repay their iniquity and their sin, because they have profaned my land. They have filled my inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable idols and their abominations. You see, you can't hide your sin. You have to destroy it. You have to turn from it. And the fisherman is coming for those that refuse to change their ways. This is what the New Testament is telling you by saying these men that followed him were fishermen. They were looking to punish the wicked. Remember, a verse I shared in part 2 was from Luke, where he says, "Bring these men to me that refuse to bow to me, the idol, and kill them." If you choose the words of the New Testament over Torah, you are caught in the net by the fisher of the men, and first will be doubly repaid for your iniquity and sin. You have profaned the land with your detestable idols. Why was Jeremiah sent out? Right. Isaiah 1, he does tell us that you have blood on your hands, and the Christians boast of having blood on their hands. I have not come but the lost sheep of Israel. And Jeremiah was one of the first one that says this. He clearly says this in Jeremiah 3. Go and call out these words toward the north and say, "Return, faithless Israel," declares Yahweh. "I will not look upon you in anger, for I am one of loving kindness," declares Yahweh. "I will not be angry forever. Only acknowledge your iniquity, that you have transgressed against Yahweh your God, have scattered your ways of harlotry to the strangers under every green tree, and you have not listened to my voice," declares Yahweh. "Return, O faithless sons," declares Yahweh, "for I am master to you, and I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and I will bring you to Zion." And here's another example of that physical promise. It's not a kingdom inside of you. It's not worshiping in spirit and truth. It's, I'm going to return you, the ones that turn from your iniquity, turn back to Yahweh. I will turn you back to Zion. The Israel should stop forsaking Yahweh. Stop forsaking the Torah. Turn back to Yahweh alone. I've discussed this before, how the New Testament tries to replace Jesus, have Jesus replace the Jeremiah, Isaiah, David, and Israel. It's the ultimate con job. Israel didn't need human sacrifice to return to Yahweh. Jeremiah 9:13-15. Because Yahweh said, "You have forsaken my Torah, which I set before them. You have not listened to my voice, nor walked according to it, but have walked after the stubbornness of their heart, after their Lord Baal, and as their father taught them. Neither, therefore, thus says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will feed them, this people, with wormwood, and will give them poisoned water to drink." The New Testament leads you, and it doesn't matter if you throw out Paul, it doesn't. The New Testament in whole leads you to forsake both Yahweh and the Torah given to Moshe. Wormwood and the poisoned water are the blood communion of the New Testament idol. His flesh is wormwood, and the poisoned water is blood. The blessing to the nations, Jeremiah 3:15-18. Then I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will shepherd you on knowledge and understanding. It shall be in those days when you are multiplied and fruitful in the land, declares Yahweh. They will no longer say, the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, and it will not come upon the heart, nor that will they remember it, nor will they miss it, nor will it be made again. At that time they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh, and all the nations will be gathered to it. Again, the physical promise that every nation will come to Jerusalem. You know, either Jeremiah is lying or Jesus is lying to the woman at the well. For the name of Yahweh, nor will they walk anymore after the stubbornness of their evil heart. In those days, the house of Judah will walk with the house of Israel, and will come together from the land of the north to the land that I gave your fathers as an inheritance. The message of salvation is that Yahweh will save Judah and Israel from their affliction and return them to the promised land he gave their fathers as an inheritance, that all the nations will be gathered to Jerusalem for the name of Yahweh, not Yeshua or Jesus. They will no longer walk after the stubbornness of their evil heart, but will all know Yah. This is one of the many reasons the New Testament idol cannot possibly be the fulfillment of prophecy. He tells you that you must teach the Jews and Gentiles the things he set in place. His gospel of the kingdom is a different promise than Yah gives the prophets. And the fact that Jesus is not the Messiah is why men forsake him. If he was the promised Messiah, he would not be able to forsake him. Let me repeat that. If Jesus was the Messiah, there would be no such thing as an antichrist, an anti-Messiah. It would be impossible. You would not be able to forsake the Messiah in the age to come. You will all know that this is the man who brought peace to the world. This is the man that brought Yahweh back to Jerusalem, and all the nations know him. You would not have to return to your first love, as Revelation says, as it would not be possible to forsake him. Every prophet declares this. Right, Sammy, and as Isaiah 33 is another good chapter for that. The King of Kings, would the Messiah, the Prince of Princes, and the King of Kings run away from his anointing? You know, many of you claim he is your king, but when it came time to anoint him king, what did he do? In John 6:15. So Jesus, knowing that they were coming to make him by force to make him king, they saw him as king. They wanted to make him king. He withdrew. He ran away again to the mountain by himself alone. You call him king, but he ran away. 1 Samuel 16:13. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed, and this is where the word Messiah or Mashiach comes from, him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of Yahweh came mightily upon David from that day forward. And Samuel arose and went to Ramah. Well, one of the reasons I've heard to keep respecting the idol is that they have made him their king. This is what I promised he would go over in the last part, that I'm going to talk about why you made him your king, but who is he king of? What is he king of? Because when the Jews that believed he was the Messiah, that he was the king, they came to make him king, he ran away. So he's not king of Israel. Servant of Yah would not want you to revere him, and this is another point of that. If he was the king of Israel, would he want you to turn your respect toward him? Isaiah 11:1-5. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots. And this is why he's not that branch. Listen carefully. He can't be the branch because he turned your fear of Yahweh to fear of him. This and a branch from its roots will bear fruit. The Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. And he will delight in the fear of Yahweh, and he will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, nor render a decision by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he will judge the poor, and decide with uprightness for the afflicted of the earth. And he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will put the wicked to death. Also righteousness will be the belt about his loins, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. If Yeshua was king, why isn't he teaching from Jerusalem the fear of Yahweh? Why isn't global peace here? The idea that he is your king and you must revere him. King of what? There isn't global peace, just constant war. There isn't fear of Yahweh, just fear of hell. And the atheists, fear of death or fear of Christians. Either way, they don't fear Yahweh. Speaking of that, how can you say he conquered death when we all will still die, even those that spend their whole life actually living as righteously as can, but still holding on to the idolatry of Yeshua? They still die. They have been waiting in vain for the last 2,000 years for him to return. Yes, Cyrus was the Messiah that brought them back from Babylon. What I see the chosen servant doing. Judges 8:22-23. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. Yahweh will rule over you." After Yahweh helped Israel to conquer the enemies through Gideon, the people still had a hard heart, asked for a man to rule over them. Gideon told them this great and prophetic statement that Yahweh is your king, and you should be letting Yahweh rule over you, not a man. He then proceeds to build a golden idol, and the heart of Gideon turned from Yahweh to this idol. And then Gideon made it an ephod, placed it in his city, Ophrah, and all Israel played harlot there. So it became a snare to Gideon and his household. You see, the man you set in front of Yahweh, he becomes your example. And Paul even tells you this, follow me as I follow Christ. And we see, I heard a video that my dear wife was listening to, that, he was talking about if you go into a house and you find out that with a brother and you find out that this non-believer has brought you food sacrificed to an idol, should you eat it? And he said, for the sake of your brother, you shouldn't eat it, but it's really nothing. And she asked me, what should you do? I said, you should never eat food sacrificed to an idol. Never. If you know food is sacrificed to an idol, it doesn't matter what your brother thinks, because what you think is not a sin. And I've been over this because the New Testament so focuses on the conscience, on what you think, that determines whether or not something is sin. If it doesn't affect your conscience, and this is Paul's point, if you were alone and it doesn't affect your conscience, it's no big deal. But if your brother is there, you don't want their conscience to be tainted, so don't do it. No, that's not how sin works. It doesn't work by what you think. Love you too, brother Sammy. We'll pray for your fence to be lighter. If you let Jesus in your hearts, you forsake Yahweh. 1 Samuel 8:6-9. But the thing was evil in the sight of Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." And Samuel prayed to Yahweh. Then Yahweh said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that you say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Like all the deeds which they have done since the day that I brought them up from Egypt, even to this day. In that day they have forsaken me and served other gods. So they are doing to you also. So now listen to their voice. However, you shall solemnly testify to them and tell them of the custom of the king who will reign over them. And this applies to every king that is not Yahweh alone, to King Saul, to King David, and we can see how he fell from honor, and he led the people from honor. And every king afterward, every king, they all turned their hearts from Yahweh. Hezekiah was one of the few exceptions. And even then, I firmly believe we should be serving Yahweh alone and not a king. And their hearts, therefore, followed after the king. That's why the kingdoms forsook Yahweh, is because the king did. He was their example. And this is what 1 Samuel 8 is telling us. It is a prophecy of everything that follows, including of Yeshua. How you making him your king is forsaking Yahweh. The only way to reconcile this is to do what the Romans did and make the man Jesus, Yahweh, God above. That is the only way to reconcile any of the New Testament. And I've been over that so often and feel like it's beating a dead horse. Yahweh does not become a man and would never become a man. And Yeshua is not Yahweh because he died. Yahweh doesn't die. Yeshua is the great apostasia for the forsaking of Yahweh alone. Father's telling me I need to read what comes next here. So this is what's going to happen if you choose a man to be your king. So Samuel spoke all the words of Yahweh to the people who had asked of him of a king. And he said, this will be the custom of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself in his chariots and among his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself the commanders of thousands and fifties, and some to do his plowing, and to reap his harvest, and to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will also take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your seed and your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male slaves and your female slaves and your best young men and your donkeys and use them for his work. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. And what does Paul call himself? A slave of Christ, not a servant of Yahweh. Then you will cry out in that day because of your king. You will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But Yahweh will not answer you in that day. Yahweh will not answer you. Nevertheless, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us. You want your king, he gave it to you. That way, we also may be like the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. You don't listen to Yahweh. Do not forgive us, Father. Exodus 14, Israel crossing the Red Sea. Now Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, so that they turn back and camp before Pi-haroth, between Migdol and the sea, and you shall camp in front of Baal Zephon opposite it by the sea. And Pharaoh will say of the sons of Israel, they are wandering in confusion in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. Thus I will harden Pharaoh's heart with strength, and he will pursue them, and I will be glorified through Pharaoh and his army, so that the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh, and that they did so. Were they saying that Moses saved them? No, it's about Yahweh. Listen, then the king of Egypt was told that the people fled, and the hearts of the Pharaoh and his servants has changed toward the people. And they said, "What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" So he made his chariot ready and took his people with him. And he took 600 choice chariots, all of the other chariots of Egypt, with the officers over all of them. And Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, with strength, and he pursued the sons of Israel, as the sons of Israel were going out with an exalted hand. And Egypt pursued them with all the horses and chariots of the Pharaoh, his horsemen, his army, and they took them camping by the sea, besides Pi-haroth, in front of Baal Zephon. Now Pharaoh drew near, and the sons of Israel lifted up their eyes and beheld that Egyptians were marching after them. They became very afraid. So the sons of Israel cried out to Yahweh. Then they said to Moses, "It is because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What is this you have done against us to bring us out of Egypt?" Even, so often they didn't trust their Father would deliver them from the hand of the enemy. Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, "Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would be better us to serve the Egyptians than for us to die in the wilderness"? But Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, stand by and see the salvation of Yahweh, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see again forever. Yahweh will fight for you." You don't have to fight your spiritual battles. You don't have to put on the full armor of God. And I have a study I'm working on about that. Yahweh will fight for you. He doesn't say we have to fight. He doesn't say that the king coming has to fight for us. He says, "I, Yahweh, will fight for you. You will keep silent." What does that mean? Stop complaining. Why are you complaining that I am not your deliverer? Why do you look for deliverance in someone besides Yahweh? The only way to reconcile that is that you don't believe the promises of Yahweh and you have forsaken him for another. What is Yeshua king of them? And the kingdom of Israel was restored about 75 years ago, as of 2023, 1948, I believe. The kingdom of Israel was restored then. It was brought with the pagan idolatry, though, and the Jews still turning from Yahweh alone in his Torah to their Torah, the Talmud, the Mishnah, and their sages. They believe the Torah of Yah is with them. And so do Christians and Messianics, though they teach the doctrines and commandments of men in vain. The Christians, and this is of all stripes, those of you who reject Paul, but you keep the idol as your king, or those who believe all the dogma and traditions of the Romans through the Protestant or Messianic branches. The Christians also forsake Yahweh through Yeshua by declaring he is your King of Kings. What is Yeshua ruling over? Well, the kingdom of heaven is within you, they tell me. Then you don't believe any of the promises of the prophets. And outside of your New Testament, which prophet ever declared this was going to be the location of the future promises to Israel? None of them. This is esoteric Gnosticism. And it's the same thing the New Age teaches today. Look within yourself to find the God inside of you. If he is king, where is his kingdom? Why will you still die? Remember Revelation 9:11. And they have as king over them, the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon. And in Greek, he has the name Apollyon. And Father, you're so awesome. He just reminded me of something. Now, Paul Let's pull up those verses. Let's use Bible Hub. It allows you to do that. No, it's the other one. Yeah, this one. 30 verse 12 and Romans 10:7. So check this out. In Romans 10:6 through 8, Paul claims he's quoting from the Torah, from Deuteronomy 30, 11 to 14. But check out this, verse 13 I want. So Deuteronomy 30:13 says this: neither is beyond the sea that thou shouldest say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that make us hear it, that we may do it. Right? So, and this is what all three of these are about, that you don't need an angel from heaven, you don't need a teacher, a king to come across the sea. You don't need it all, any of that, because it should be where? It should be in your heart, so you may do it. But Paul twists this. He removes so you may do it all three times. And in the middle one, he says this, though: who shall descend into the abyss? That has nothing to do with the sea. Nothing. But it does have something to do with Revelation 9:11 and the angel of the abyss. That is interesting. Because Paul says that Christ is the one that went into the abyss and came back. What did he come back as? I've been thinking about doing a study on that. How the resurrection shows who he is as well. He is the angel of the abyss. He is Abaddon. He is Apollyon. You have made the God of death and destruction your King of Kings. This is why there is no global peace. Why there are 40,000 denominations all worshiping the same God, and you can't make up your mind on what to bring to the buffet dinner that won't cause fighting, what color to make the drapes. You can't agree on that. Yet state that you are filled with the Holy Spirit. The Christian church is filled with lying spirits and demons of death. It is not light. It is all a ruse, all a lie. And it doesn't matter. Like, it's like Satanists have made themselves better by turning to Jesus. It doesn't matter. You're still forsaking Yahweh. You are trapped in the net. You have forsaken Yahweh for an idol. And I agree with that. Yah, please come quickly. Please turn the hearts of men back to you alone. Thank you for listening. And I wish you all, not shalom, because I don't want to say peace when there should be no peace. Have a heart for Yahweh. Listen to his gentle tug to repent when you sin. Hallelujah.